First, Stan, why don't we go to you? And you know, there's no shortage of exploit kits, and so we've got some new ones coming out. This one has a little bit, you know, some special features associated with it, right?
Yes, I think, well, to start, the guys at Trustwave did a pretty good analysis of the rig exploit kit. I guess some source code was leaked, and they did an analysis. They have a lot of detail on their blog entry online, but some things that stood out for me is the architecture of it. You know, as security researchers, we usually only get to see the high level or the first step where the victim meets the exploit kit, so to speak. But there's apparently this whole other set of things in the back end that the guys use to make sure they keep their hosting up and lets them continue staying up. So it's an interesting article, and I like how they go into the architecture of it, because I think most people probably don't understand how it works. There's a lot of advanced features that they support in order to continue helping themselves stay up and keep their hosting. They even, you know, probably standing behind some servers that are legitimate, like I think Cloudflare or something like that, which is a legitimate hosting provider, but allows things like this, which might be illegitimate, to continue having hosting. And another thing that they did is, well, this rig exploit kit, it actually separates the privileges of the different components of the exploit kit. For example, there's a customer management interface. That's one server. There's the server that has all the exploits on it. That's another component in the architecture. And then there is a set of compromised machines that they use to actually redirect people. And those servers that host the exploit kits, that's yet another component. So by keeping everything separated like that, they're probably able to make sure that security researchers kind of don't have all of the components all in one place to be able to tag them down easily. So a very interesting article. They also showed I guess, some of the, like, how the guys are structured, how I guess the operators of the exploit kit are structured. And based on some of their rough calculations, they think like this exploit brings their operators about $90,000 a week or something like that.
Wow.
So, but I mean, those are rough estimates. It may not be accurate, but it's just something, you know, something interesting to note.
Right. Now, is there any speculation on how many people might be behind that?
I don't think I saw that in the article.
Okay. That's always sort of an interesting topic from my point of view. Something, again, you don't really see the back-end infrastructure associated with it, but when you consider the complexity of some of the tools that are out there and how they have to basically divvy up whatever, you know, maliciously gained revenue, how much they're really making in the end. You know, there have certainly been some cases where it looks like it's been sort of lucrative for the attackers, but there's also a growing amount of risk associated with that end of the business as well.
Right, and I think they're really trying to cater to make it simpler for people. So as a customer of the rig exploit kit, you'd just be exposed to the customer-facing website, and you can upload your malicious software, and everything happens in the background for you. You know, really all the obfuscation of the malware and delivery to the victims, that all happens behind the scenes. I think for like $160 a week, as what they quoted, you can have you know, something like that. And I think they said it's about 10 to 15% infection rate. So of all the people coming through, exploits work 10 to 15% of the time. So it's pretty significant, you know, depending on how many compromised servers they have out there and yeah, what the flow through rate is. They also mentioned, you know, you said about numbers, how many customers they have, and there's several hundred customers that the researchers at Trustwave were able to pin down. So I don't know how many bad guys there really are, but the number of customers they have is in the hundreds.
Okay. You know, this is somewhat tangential, but when you said about the infrastructure and the back-end portion of it, it reminded me of, you know, having been tracking botnet activity and the evolution of that. You know, one of the sort of fundamental concepts that at least I have seen is that there really is very little revolution in attack capabilities. The techniques are really just, you know, incremental changes, improvements from a sort of a malicious point of view to try to deal with the problems that they're running into along the way. And I remember back when a botnet may have consisted of, you know, 2 IRC controllers, and they were overcoming things like, well, IRC is not all that scalable. You have to have some other way of managing it, and it's, it became very volatile in that, they'd knock down an IP address, and so it would take down the botnet. And so they started using more and more controllers. Well, then you have a new kind of management problem, and then they went to P2P networks and deliberately spreading them across different international boundaries so that it would slow down the process of trying to implement blocks. So interesting how the back-end infrastructure has evolved over time. But it is very much an evolution. That's one of the things that I think is very valuable about doing threat analysis, is that you can, once you've learned the history, you actually can predict a little bit about what the technology might go to in the next phase.
Well, I think one of the interesting things to me was just this using of proxies to disguise the location of the exploits and the malicious code itself, and that one of the more successful techniques we have for blocking these things and protecting people from getting victimized is that there's not a lot of hosts out there that are willing to intentionally host exploits and payloads. So there's sort of this known malware destination type thing going on out there that can help web filters, antivirus, etc. block a lot of these things. And by having this kind of fast rotating proxy service, that really that obfuscation really complicates the detection method, meaning you have to now detect the code itself. You can't just detect the reputation of where it's coming from. Absolutely.
So from an internet service provider point of view, it's certainly more complicated. From a observer's point of view, it's certainly more complicated. One of the things, and I think you're kind of hedging on this, that is, as a cloud service provider, as a hosting provider, I think there's fundamentally a responsibility to be paying attention to how the service is being used. That is, if you're selling a service that's ultimately being used for a malicious purpose, it's almost a contributor to the activity. And so, not that it's easy, but there's still appears to be, at least in my opinion, some level of responsibility of the service provider to understand how those services are being used. Thanks, Dan. That was a good discussion there.